right, it's exciting to have you back with us on the program. Good morning, Nigeria, the network service. And as I said earlier on, our conversation is on the 2022 Appropriation Bill. And to set our conversation rolling, we have a background there put together by our State House correspondent, Adamo Sambo.
It was a warm and befitting welcome for President Muhammadu Buhari in the hallowed chamber of the National Assembly as he formally presents the 2022 Appropriations Bill for consideration and approval. The budget proposal, the last expected to be fully implemented by this administration, is predicated on conservative oil price benchmark of $57 per barrel, oil production estimate of 1.88 million barrels per day, an exchange rate of 410 naira 15 kobo to $1, a projected GDP growth rate of 4.2%, as well as an inflation rate of 13%. The budget is made up of a capital expenditure of 5.35 trillion naira, non-debt recurrent cost of 6.85 trillion naira, personnel cost of 4.11 trillion naira, 3.61 trillion naira for debt service, and a sinking fund of 292.71 billion naira.
Our target over the medium term is to grow our revenue to GDP ratio from about 8% currently to 15% by 2025. At that level of revenue, the debt service to revenue ratio will cease to be worrying. Put simply, we do not have a debt sustainability problem, but a revenue challenge which we are determined to tackle.
As the Buhari presidency proposes, the 2022 budget is expected to be funded by 10.13 trillion naira oil, non-oil, and other revenues, while a deficit of 6.26 trillion naira will be financed by new borrowings, privatization process, and drawdowns on loans secured for specific development projects.
Some have expressed concern over our resort to borrowing to finance our fiscal gaps. They are right to be concerned. However, we believe that the debt level of the federal government is still within sustainable limits. Borrowing at specific strategic projects and can be verified publicly. Very importantly, we have endeavored to use the loans to finance critical development projects and programs aimed at improving our economic environment and ensuring effective delivery of public services to our people.
Although details on the budgetary allocation to MDAs are yet to be made public, President Buhari gave a hint that defense and internal security will continue to be accorded his administration's top priority.
We remain firmly committed to the security of life, property, and investment nationwide. We will continue to ensure that our gallant men and women in the armed forces, police, and paramilitary units are properly equipped and well motivated. The 2022 budget is also the first in our history where MDAs were clearly advised on gender-responsive budgeting. These are part of critical steps in our efforts to distribute resources fairly and reach vulnerable groups in our society.
President Buhari used the opportunity to appreciate the immense patriotic and collaborative support of the National Assembly to the government efforts at delivering socio-economic development and democracy dividends to Nigerians.
I wish to assure you of the strong commitment of the executive to strengthen the relationship with the National Assembly. Nigeria is currently emerging from a very difficult economic challenge. We must continue to cooperate and ensure that our actions are aimed at accelerating the pace of economic recovery so that we can achieve economic prosperity and deliver on our promises to Nigerian people.
The president once again thanked the lawmakers for the passage of the Petroleum Industry Act and hoped that the implementation of the new law will boost confidence in the nation's economy and attract substantial investments in the sector.
Thank you very much, Adamu Sambo, for that backgrounder. With us to discuss matters arising from the 2022 Appropriation Bill, we have a number of our regular economic analysts, and then, of course, a new face is also joining us this morning. Professor Kenife, economic policy analyst, delight to have you on Good Morning Nigeria again. And from the Department of Economics at University of Abuja, let's welcome Professor Oyinola Olaniyi. Professor Olaniyi, pleasure to have you this morning.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
And let's also welcome to us in our studio a familiar face, Niyi Akinshijo, who is a financial and investment analyst. Mr. Akinshijo, thank you for joining us on the program.
Thanks for having me. It's a privilege. Good morning, Nigerians.
All right.
All right, so gentlemen, once again, we welcome you to the program. Basic assumptions around the 2022 Appropriation Bill are fairly well known, and some of the highlights we've read and some of the highlights we've also listened to in our background. But what exactly is unique about the 2022 Appropriation Bill? First, Professor Kenife.
Now, what is unique about it is you can, despite the two major existential challenges that we faced last year, one is security, is an existential challenge. Then the COVID is a matter of life and death. But despite all of that, I can see Nigeria coming out of the woods from this budget relative to all the other budgets of this administration. I can see light in the end of the tunnel, and I can see on a pound-to-pound, naira-to-naira comparison of this budget and the current one, how we are emerging. If you look at the fundamentals you just mentioned, $40 this year, $57 next year, 1.6 million barrels a day this year, 1.88 million barrels a day. The exchange rate is neither here nor there, but it's 379, is 410, and then inflation figures trending down, though not stiff enough. And then when you look at certain characteristics of our parameters, financial ratios, there is an improvement. You could see that we are likely to end up with under 30-something percent, 36% or so revenue, debt service to GD, to government revenue, as opposed to 46.8 projected in this year. And then the revenue increment, which is over 2 trillion, coming from our PIA, is comfort. It's real comfort. And there are many others we will unravel, quite a few other things that are good signs. And that actually says that the administration might finish off really stronger than it started.
All right, I'm told that our guest in our Kaduna studio is ready with us, so let's quickly bring him in. Professor Yushao Ango, Professor of Finance and Entrepreneurship and Dean School of Postgraduate Studies in Kaduna State University. Always a pleasure to have you join us. Let me also stay with you since we have introduced you, and also get your own perspective about the 2020 budget that has been presented to the National Assembly. What for you are the, what excites you about this budget?
Yes, good morning. Thank you very much for having me. I believe the budget clearly is a progression from the previous budgets that have been presented by this administration. What excites me particularly was the reference made by the President to the fact that the administration survived 2 recessions, and the recessions were, we came out of it because we had to spend money, and in spending those monies, we had to borrow to spend, because for you to come out of recession, there must be a lot of economic activity taking place in the country. Now that has happened, and the concern I have of the budget is the fact that when you look at the tax to revenue, sorry, the expected tax to revenue targets or to GDP, we have shot a little bit out of the Economic Act that was enacted for that purpose. But having said that, I think we are on course, obviously. I think there are issues that, or some recommendations that we may have as we go along in the course of the discussion. But by and large, until we see the details of the specific allocations to MDAs, I think we're on the right course, especially considering, like the props said, the exchange rate, the expected daily exploration of oil at 1.88 as against last year's targets, and the expected GDP growth of 4.2%, which is encouraging. And given what happened in the second quarter, we're waiting for result of third quarter, I think it's achievable. Having come out of COVID, I think sincerely we are on course. But then there are some ends that need to be sharpened so that we don't mix some essential targets, and we correct and reduce some possible negative consequences that may arise, that may affect it. Otherwise, I feel it's an encouraging presentation, and we look forward to the details so that we can now say for sure what it will be. Another thing which is interesting is the gender-based approach, which is for the first time being considered, for MDAs and all that. I think, again, that is another innovation, and I hope it's sustained so that whatever we do, we take cognizance of the diversity and ensure inclusion in whatever we do in various aspects of the economy.
All right, thanks a lot, Professor Yushua Ango. Back to the Abuja studios, Nia Kinsiju. Let's have your take on what you consider unique about the appropriation bill.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. I want to look beyond the figures at the literature, specifically the objectives underlining the budget presentation, as it were. I think there are about five objectives outlaid by the president. The very first one, diversifying the economy with growth in MSMEs. I think it principally talks to our historical aspiration, and of course, that aspiration had actually turned out to be a challenge over time. And I think precisely focusing on the MSMEs to drive diversification is an appropriate objective, and we can only wish and hope that that is realized. Everybody who's a good analyst would always submit that the MSMEs are the power drivers of the economy, as it were. Reducing poverty, that had also been an historical aspiration, had been a major reality of the economy, as it were. And of course, by reducing poverty, it also talks to growth in the economy. We also have reducing diversity. Reducing, I think, 1, 2, 3, reducing regional disparities in terms of economy and social positioning. That also talks to the differences, in the capacity of the capacity of subnationals, and we are hoping that that could also close up. This talks in a way to the VAT argument. For me, it talks to different sentiments that have been issues. That have become issues in the public space over which of the subnationals, would be would be advantaged, which would be disadvantaged, as it were. And of course, closing up these disparities over time will reduce those sentiments as public talks, or public debates in the space. And I also appreciate the fact that there's a linkage of the proposal to the development plan, 2021 to 2025 development plan. We have heard about it. The president said the details of development plan will be made public. I am looking forward, to those details. We had always been a nation driven by development plans from the immediate post-independent era. And of course, even before the independent year, we had the 1956, 58 development plan, as it were. And of course, by 86, we had abandoned that, and we more or less reverted to a situational budgeting process where we look at a 12-month cycle. But I think reverting to the 5-year cycle in the medium term, and I think there's also a long-term development plan that goes to from 25 to 50. I mean, it's what that tells us is that we are looking at long-term, medium to long-term planning, which avail us capacity to plan, and of course to project as appropriate. So looking at the literature, I think the budget is focused. But of course, we also know the perennial challenges of the Nigerian budget, as it were, as related to revenue and all that. I think going forward, we should be able to dimension some of these thoughts. I mean, some of these positions in the budget.
All right, thank you, Mr. Akinsheju. Let's put you on hold for the moment and bring in Professor Oyinlola Olaniyi, who is an economic professor, Department of University of Abuja. If we look at the economics of the budget proposal, what do you think, which direction is this budget driving us, given, of course, the existential issues, challenges that Professor Ken Ife referred to earlier on?
Thank you very much. Well, first, let us look at the realism of those projections. Given the performance of the economy the last two quarters, I will agree that the benchmark is realistic because crude oil has been going for like 60, 68, so 57 is realistic, coming up from 40 of last year. Also, the quantity that we need, we are talking about, because you need both the quantity and the price to get. That's also realistic, given what has happened in the immediate past. Now, this show that there is prospect of higher revenue for the economy in 2022. And that should normally suggest that we should be more we should be more careful with the issue of exchange rate. Whereas there is greater prospect of increase in revenue. We are planning. We are going into a planned devaluation. That is, we had 375 as the exchange rate projected for last year, and we are having 410. That is projected devaluation. And I don't think we should be doing that. Yes, there's a disparity between the official and we should work at maintaining what we had, because the prospect is better. When we were having those two challenges, the COVID we needed to spend more money, and also we were coming out of that, led us into a recession, and we needed to spend more money. It's leveling up. It's leveling up. So the urgency, the unexpected expenditure is going to reduce. As a result, we need to begin to either try to sustain what we had planned last year, which we could not sustain, but planning a devaluation will further hurt. Now, so what we need to do is probably, what are the reasons why, because it may also be argued that government is trying to match up with reality, because of the gap. But rather than giving, it's better to look at why could we not sustain the exchange rate? Why could we not sustain and try to work towards sustaining it? Because even if we had an official exchange rate of 375 or so, and in the black market is 573 or so as at today, if you now project to devaluate yourself, it enhances the black market to also want to.
Yeah,
so,
but you want to factor in the I and A window, the rate that they use there. That's already above 375. It's around about the range that the government is projecting for the appropriation for next year.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that rather than, project, we should rather try to sustain. Because we have a better revenue profile, which means we are stronger. We are going to be stronger in the financial realm than that. So that is one thing I think. The only thing I can think that we could do better in. Otherwise, the prospects are better for next year. And I like actually the fact that we have been borrowing is a bitter pill. But when you are using it to do things that will enhance productivity, it is advisable. So we can see rails are coming up, which will enhance productivity. We can see better roads in some parts, and which we will need to improve upon. So we need, but we just only need, like Professor Karen talked about, only need to make sure that the money that we budget go into the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Olani. Professor Kenneth, earlier you said exchange rate neither here nor there. But you listen to your brother, Professor.
Yeah.
Raise some concern about the figures, but I'm not quite sure what the point is. Because part of what he's saying is, look, if for our previous projection was 375, and midway the monetary authorities decided to say, look, this is the more realistic rate, about 400 and something, and that's what is now being carried over to 2022. Does that indicate that something is amiss?
Actually, well, I see where he's coming from, but the challenge is that when we have managed float currency, because there's a wide disparity between the demand for the currency and the supply available. So because of that wide disparity, we have to manage it. And in the course of managing it, we have a window where we try to see a market reflective rate, So that's IE window is really where we say, okay, so let's follow that. So in the last dispensation, in the last budget, it was around 379, so that's fine. And now it's shifted to 410. It hovers around 410, 412. And if you want to push that down, you're going to have to subsidize. And I'm not very sure we're strong enough to subsidize. You're going to pour billions and billions of dollars to push down that rate. And you are going to be working against market force because you already have a huge gap between the 410 and the actual 570 in the black market. So how far can you go
parallel market?
In the parallel market? How far can you go in burning our reserves to be able to push that down. So that's the concern that I have there. But I have something that is of remarkable interest to me in this budget. If you look at the first recession, in 2016, the first recession, 2016, what drove us into recession was oil, the dominance of oil revenue over non-oil. So it put us into recession. And it was when the accretion came, when it increased, that's when we came out of. So it was the same oil that played in and out. Now, in this last one, last year, COVID, oil also played us in, and then non-oil played us out of it. And that is very remarkable, because when you compare the expected revenue last year and this year, there is an increase. But when you disaggregate it, you will find that the oil component is 3.16 trillion. The non-oil is 2.13 trillion. And the independence revenue, 1.82 trillion. If you add these two, it's 3.95 trillion. So we now have an inflection where the non-oil revenue are driving the growth, driving our recovery. That is very remarkable, because what it means now is that the component of oil on our revenue is dropping to 43%. It used to be 60%, down to 50%, and now it's 43%. So that continuing to drive it down means more fiscal stability for our country. So that's very important. Then the other thing is, if you look at the international best practices, in the Fiscal Responsibility Act, we only have one. We only have debt, the fiscal deficit to GDP at 3%. Now we've pushed to 4 points, nearly 5% last year. This year is projected to come down to about 3.3%, which is good, because we are now actually close to what the law says, even though it's been amended and improved to 4. But it's a better sign of health. Then you have the personnel cost. According to ECOWAS macroeconomic convergence criteria, the personnel cost should not be more than 35%. Now we are 41%, which is coming down. Even though we've paid everybody's salary and benefits, and there's one good thing about the administration, they have paid salaries. They have maintained debt service. So it is actually coming down slightly. Then you look at another one, capital expenditure. This is about the highest that we are having, actually, 33%. So, and that bodes well for employment and public works. So you can now see that more resources are coming to capital budget. And the commitment, from what we see from the president's speech, they are going to meet all the capital expenditure projection for this year. Okay, so that's very important. And finally, let me get out of this. Finally, the debt service is projected now at 36%. This year, it was 46.8%. Last year, 2 years ago, I'm not really sure. Last year, it was like we ended up at about 83%, So it's coming down, it's improving.
Okay, so my question to you now will be, everybody seemed to have commended the budget comparatively, with what we had last year. You have expressed optimism that it seems it will take us out of the woods. But let's do some assumptions. The existential challenges that you referred to, COVID-19 is still there, insecurity is still there, it's not abating, it's, even though we are trying to, cut the ends. We are also having other emerging, health challenges. Cholera is hitting,
Correct.
Yes. And you cannot predict the global stability or the dynamics of the global oil prices. What if something happens? Will it threaten the budget estimates for next year?
Inevitably, things happen. Tomorrow, you can have another variant of COVID that sends everybody into a lockdown. There's no question about that. But the fact is this, we have to be realistic. You know why I say we have to be realistic? This is a nation that is at war in all the 6 geopolitical zones. Many countries are still paying for the Second World War. You know that. It was in 1945. Many countries are still paying the debt that they incurred in the Second World War. We haven't gone to borrow $100 billion because we are fighting wars. And they are asymmetric warfare, for a start. Asymmetric. We haven't said, okay, look at all countries. One question we should really ask is this. Why are the development finance institutions eager to give money to Nigeria. If we think it's all so bad, why are they throwing money to Nigeria? There are $9 trillion sovereign funds looking for where to invest. And Nigeria happens to be one of the ones that they want to give their money to. Because the fundamentals that they look at when they go to the computer and say, can I lend to this country? Well, they have never defaulted. They are a resource-rich country. There are so many things that they will say, give, give, give. But that many countries are not in that position to receive money right now because the COVID has decimated their financial capability. So we need to bear that in mind. So we haven't imposed an extraordinary tax called war tax to help us get out of this. We are still managing. But the good thing is that the Oil Act, that APIA, has put us, taking us out of the life support machine and then giving us more hope of increased revenue. And I'd like to hear something that was not, I couldn't see in the budget. How would we deal with the subsidy, oil subsidy going forward? Because that's a big hole in our public expenditure. Over $100 billion every month just going somewhere.
Thank you, Professor Ken.
Maybe I need to chip in something here. You see, when I talk about exchange rates, we have some policies that obviously has affected the exchange rate. Well, of course, you have mentioned the subsidy. Now, if we take that off, the pressure on the naira, on the dollar reduces. But we crashed interest rates 2 years ago from 13% to about 1%. If people cannot save their naira again, so they pick their money from the bank and buy dollar and keep. That is one of the areas of pressure on the dollar. In an economy where inflation is 13%, thereabouts. 17%. And savings rate is 1%. Does it make any economic sense? It means you have a negative interest rate of 16% if you put your money in the bank.
Correct. That's correct.
So people go to the bank, carry their millions, go to area zone 4, change it to dollar, and either put it in a domiciliary account or put it in their houses. That is one source of pressure on the naira, on the dollar. Why can't we release that? Why? What you see? When we said armchair banking, wanted to encourage banks to give money for production. Have you done a study to find out whether the money has been channeled to production? Since that policy, when we make a policy, we evaluate the policy, know whether it is working. There are intended and unintended consequences of every policy. Every policy, every change has negative and positive consequences. When you make a change, you study the effect of the change. Did we achieve the objective? If we did, were there other unintended consequences? How do we change to take care of the unintended consequences and enhance the positive effects that we expected? We have left it for about two and a half years. And since that time, when we did that, the black market rate was about 400 or less. Okay, so have we studied why? Yes, diaspora money did not come, so did it solve it? Have we evaluated that and seen whether it is possible? That is one of the problems.
Okay, Professor Lani, thanks a lot. Let's go back to Yushua Ango in our Kaduna Network Center before we come back to Nei Akinseju here in the Abuja studios. Professor Yushua Ango, just taking a look generally at the budget and the intendment, what should the nation's economy look forward to? And what should, at the micro level, what should the individual and corporate entities also look forward to? Is this likely to spell more well-being?
The budget is a budget of economic growth and sustainability. So basically, what the private sector should look forward to is an era or a year in which there will be sustainability in the various aspects of the economy. We also expect, given the deliberate decision to invest or to at least spend quite an amount, about 36% of the budget on capital expenditure, that infrastructure will be improved, there will be progression and continuity. Mind you, this is the budget, like the President said, in which the administration will have a full year of implementation. So we will expect to see sustainability in the various initiatives that have been started by the administration, particularly with regards to infrastructure, with regards to social expenditures and all those things. So on the social side, the individual will expect that. Another thing probably that we hope is that having at least reduced the pressure that we have gone through with regards to COVID, we expect that inflation will reduce as has been projected, which is, it's been projected at 13% now, which is lower than what we have suffered in the recent past. So given that, I think the well-being of the individual will be better taken care of. Another thing that probably we should look forward to is that we have seen, with regards to security issues, what has happened, especially in the Northeast. There is now success, obviously, that has been achieved, and that will now reduce those aspects. Now, attention is on the Northwest, where the issues of banditry and things like that are happening. So that is an area, perhaps, if there is better security in the North Central, North West also, just as we have now better security, obviously, from in the Northeast, then again, that will give room for a lot more economic activities to take place. The concern, obviously, which is somehow out of the budget, is the issue of environmental issues. There are environmental issues. This is a year, for example, where rains came late, and there is fear that it will go early. If that happens, that will be telling, especially in terms of crop yields, and then ultimately the price of food commodities and all that. But otherwise, this is a year that both corporates and individuals should expect growth, and then should expect sustainability of programs in terms of infrastructure and in terms of various expenditures of government, which will now dovetail into better economic well-being, hopefully with lower inflation projected for the average Nigerian.
So, Ango, we're back here in the studio, and my question is to Mr. Nee. I'd like for us to look at all, the impact of all the budget implementations, on the ordinary Nigerian, because as we speak, you've all talked about, how realistic the 2022 budget appropriation bill is or looks. And let us look at what has happened in the previous year and how it has impacted implementation of that 2021 budget, how it has impacted on Nigerians. If you go to the market woman is complaining. Everybody is complaining, looking for what to eat and all that. Insecurity is rife. People are being kidnapped. The roads are really, are becoming difficult to travel by, though, huge construction work is going on here and there. You can't even fly. And we are talking about spending out of recession. I mean, to the ordinary Nigerian, they are still in recession. The recession is felt in their pockets. So how can we explain to people that the 2020 budget is realistic? 2022 budget is realistic and will change or will impact on their lives and livelihood?
Thank you. In good conscience, I think we must acknowledge the president, in his presentation, talking about being, 2021, 2021 being a difficult year. So I think there's an aggregation of that position in the president's own mind. And to that extent, it's the fact that there is a need to address, that difficulty. And we can extend it beyond 2020, 2021 to 2015. Getting into recession in 2016, for instance, was a climax of what had been happening since 2014. And of course, as noted, we had challenges with crude oil price at that time, and that led us into that recession. The recession is by concept and, of course, by manifestation, a definition of difficulty. So when it gets there, it now depends on how creative the government, in place would deploy policies to exit us. The policy used at that time was to spend us out of, spend more money and create activities within the economy and, of course, grow the economy. If you are growing the economy, it's also relative. If you grow the economy by 0.23%, you are growing. If you grow by 2%, you are growing. But, of course, it will not impact the larger lines of population at the same time. So it's going to take some time, And again, it will also depend on the emphasis of outcome by the administration. For instance, this talk of by Prof Olani is basically on real negative returns, on savings. I think the emphasis by government, was to, by the monetary authority at that time, was to emphasize production and productivity, so that banks are not, savers, investors are not encouraged to save money. Rather than save, they are encouraged, to invest in production. And that in investing in production, you not only create more quantum of production or product lines, you are also creating employment in that regard. And this is an economy that requires a lot of employment opportunities or employment creations, job creations, as it were. And of course, it also has implication for treasury bills, yields on bills and bonds, so much that over the last 18 months thereabout, yields on bond had been below inflation rate, and to that extent, negative real returns. But the whole idea is, as whatever we have in terms of the little we're earning, can we direct that into production? And for me, that has been an historical thing, an historical challenge for Nigeria. It's about what are we producing? To what extent are we backwardly, integrating with raw materials here to produce, And can we reduce importation in a way that we would also, activate a lot of economic activities in the country? And that's why I'm hooking up, I'm also appreciating the number one objective of the 2022 projected, appropriation bill, to encourage or to incentivize MSMEs, to grow. So when we look at the difficult situation, I am also thinking that already there is a perceptible reduction in the indicators of mystery, inflation rate, for instance. We have moved in the last 5 months from 18.7 to 17.1. It is projected by 2022 that will go down to 13%. Well, that still is not ideal. The target for the administration and for the CBN that I know is a band between 6% and 9%. If we get there, of course, it will reflect in market prices. But the truth of the matter is, we have been in a state of difficulty since 2016. And as we were trying to stabilize in 2019, 2020 came with COVID pandemic with grievous, implication for health and, of course, by extension for the economy. So the important thing is to keep hope alive by looking at those figures and its applications. We have had years, where we talk about capital expenditure so much that we only have less than 50% performance in capital expenditure. But now, in 2020, 2021, we're talking of 100% achievement in capital expenditure, and that is the aspect or the side of the budget that impacts the larger population.
You talked about growing our productive sector, that's the manufacturing sector. But is it possible to encourage local manufacturing while also cutting foreign direct investments? How do we, shore up or ensure that what can we do to encourage our local manufacturers to step up in their capacity?
If in encouraging local manufacturers, it's to actually do what the government is doing now. I think we have to consider that. Deliver on infrastructure. What have been the major limitations for local production? It's that the average barber, the average manufacturer of soap and all that cannot even access power, for instance. When in moving small goods from one point to the other, there's difficulty of movement. There's high cost of that will have to be, that will have to be implied in the movement of goods and raw materials and all that. So it is obvious that our major challenge has been what I call the boats are not infrastructure, roads, bridges, and the likes, and of course power and all that. These have major implication, for productivity. But again, can we achieve it at a goal? We are supposed this year now to be investing $100 billion on providing infrastructure for Nigeria. But do we have it? We don't have it. So it has to be prioritized. And of course, it has to be graduated. I am also believing that the president's commitment to PPP, public partnership, will also go a long way in filling this void, this gap, as it were.
Nee, thank you very much. Back to Professor Kanife. Professor Kanife, well, you're optimistic about the goals of the 2022 appropriation bill. Tell us what you think the common man, as the saying goes, should look forward to with 2022 on the horizon.
Well, if you notice how quickly we came out of recession in just one quarter, it was because of concerted fiscal and monetary policy intervention. So that had the CBN put 3.5 trillion on the table, 1 trillion for the manufacturing sector, and then you saw economic sustainability plan with 2.3 trillion, and they all went for both the supply side and the demand side of our balance sheet. And then that is for the GDP. They were focusing on both the consumption side and the output side of the GDP. So that was why while we were getting more capacity, productivity, we were giving even that the people can actually afford to buy those products. So in that way, we quickly got out of it. It was deliberate. But there was a cost. The cost is that we had to borrow. If you don't have the money, if you want to make investment, you have to look at your pocket. What do you have? We don't have it. So we just had to borrow. But of course, part of the success story was that we had pension fund that we could borrow from. And then we also had 2022 Act that said we should create a trust fund for the unclaimed dividends and all of that. And we borrow against those. So we're beginning to, and then we have infrastructure company now from 1 trillion going to 15 trillion. We will now use Naira to deal with our infrastructure. And then that means government is more likely to reduce borrowing with this company steaming ahead. But the fact is that that activity stopped many more people from going into bankruptcy, stopped many more people from being unemployed, and bred life into the common man. And that's why we get out of that recession. And then we are now on a growth pedestal. And the thing is that the budget now is consolidating that growth. And thanks for the I will never cease to talk about what the PIA means to us. Apart from the fact that the PIA hasn't sorted out this whole hemorrhage on our forex by this what's going on in petroleum importation and all the subsidy, but at least we can now see that we are going to get more money from this oil industry. We're not getting it. We're getting it. We're getting it. But it is that money that you're going to use to fight.
Professor Ken, if money from oil doesn't come overnight, you know this. Investment decisions are not made overnight. Now you have created the legal environment for investors to come in, and they're going to take their time and say, okay, this is what we're going to invest in the next 5 years, in another 10 years. It is good that we have taken that monkey off our back that had been there for 20 years or more. In fact, some persons would argue that since we had the Petroleum Act in 1969, nothing else had changed significantly. But money is not going to come from the oil investment overnight. Prof.
Well, I hear you. I hear you. Let me tell you, the moment that was passed, Inland Revenue said we can now expect our revenue to be more than 10 trillion. We're no longer talking about 5 trillion. And we have actually seen extra 2 trillion enter into the revenue equation from 8.8 trillion last year, 8.5 to 10 points. So there's a gap of 2-point-something trillion coming in. So you don't have to wait for investment for that to come. It's inefficiencies. We are not projected. It's
minus the VAT war.
No, wait a minute. The VAT will be collected. The issue is who is collecting it and who is getting part of the collection fee. I don't think the VAT is going to go away. But the thing is that you can actually see that the misalignments are beginning to correct and more revenue are coming to the state. And it's not disappearing. There are still some disappearing, and we're saying what we're going to do about those. The fact is this: there is less risk of that vaporizing away because the projections on the oil price are real. If you look at the American Energy Information Agency, they projected. They're even saying that there are even more people saying that $100 is going to be the price by the end of the year. So there are positive signs that revenue will continue to increase. Okay. The production volume is also increasing, but so there are positive signs on that side.
Prof, thanks a lot. But you're still speaking largely, I would say, at the macro level. Professor Olaniyi, let's break this down. To say, when we say the common man, we're referring to all of us. Nii earlier was talking about headline inflation, but we know that the component of it, which is food inflation, is significant. Now, Professor Kenife draws attention to rising oil prices. We have stopped, at least on Good Morning Nigeria, celebrating high oil prices because we know that the cost of importing refined products also hurts us. And then he earlier talked about subsidy. How do you deal with the subsidy? Again, that's a hot potato. You remove subsidy, and then you trigger another round of inflation. You trigger another round of misery. So how do we deal with this? We know that, it's economics. You always say on the one hand and then on the other hand.
Please,
where's the third hand?
Yes, please, just note the question. When we come back from this break, you'll take it up.
Okay,
all right, let's take a break now.
From now.
All right, you're welcome back here. You're still watching Good Morning Nigeria, and we're live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Let's go back to Professor Olaniyi. Prof, I was taken up from the points articulated by Professor Kenife with regard to what we need to do or what should be the expectation of when we say the common man. It means everybody, includes the elite class. It will include partnerships, it will include businesses, and ultimately the state itself. In terms of well-being, what can we look forward to? Bearing in mind some of the stats that are in tension one with the other. Oil prices are going up, and then the cost of our importing refined petroleum products will also be increasing. Now, we have a subsidy regime. Can you deal with that hot potato and say, take away the subsidy? If you take away the subsidy, would that not increase the misery index? And if oil prices are going up and gas is denominated in US dollars and the GENCOs, would say, oh, the price has gone up, and then the discourse will say, oh, cost recovery is not enough for us, multi-year tariff, you increase tariff. So how do we deal with all of these issues while government, of course, is handling the macro issues that will keep the economy continuously on its wheels?
Yeah, thank you very much. That's why I really wanted to follow from his discussion about that, whether we have gone out of recession or we have not gone out of recession. I wanted to start with a joke by Samuelson. The recession, when my friend, my neighbor loses his job, there is recession. But when I lose my job, it's depression. I was trying to make a distinction between recession and depression, of course. So the magnitude, the fact is that we are looking at the distress level in the economy. The magnitude, the way you measure it, depends on actually how it comes back to you. Quite a lot of positives are expected. Like we have all acknowledged, government is going to get more revenue. And so there is likely to be a more monetary expansion within the system. And so there will be more money flowing in the system. But the cost implications, like I said, about, and we are expecting really, as growth projection around the world increase, the price of crude oil will increase. And of course, we'll be able to cushion up our reserves, which may eventually have its effect on the pressure on the dollar in the economy. So we may be able. So that's actually where we were talking about, instead of sustaining what we have, trying to go down. But the effect of these things, prices will go up if we have a planned deregulation. You expect a further the projection about lowering interest rates and planning deregulation, they are at cross purposes. I mean, lowering inflation and planning a further deregulation are at cross purposes, because how much of what we eat and what we produce do we produce in the country? We have, this is an economy where we have about between 60 and 70% import content, what we use. If we, all of us, except now that we are sowing these kind of things, before we'll have one suit that will if we look at what
Me is still wearing one.
So if you look at us, if you wake up in the morning and you look at yourself, was manufactured somewhere.
Sold in Nigeria.
It's sold in Nigeria. So if you look at yourself, you see most of the things that are on you and you eat and all that come from abroad. So that's why we have to be careful about how we manage and how we administer the exchange rates. That goes back to everybody. Now, if we are increasing costs of everything, and the other time Prof said we have managed not to tax people. There are unseen tax. In economics, it's not only when people bring money that is tax. We have inflationary tax. If you check your income in the last 3 years, you are earning 30% of what you used to earn. You earn the same naira, but what you can buy is just about 30% of what you could buy like 3 or 4 or 5 years. I mean, like precisely when the dollar was less than 200, okay, and now. So there are people have been taxed. People have been, the belt is almost breaking. Yes, So we just hope that there will be some relief in some of these areas to cushion up as more money gets into the coffers of government. Government will also balance, what it has been taken from, try to improve the income of workers or of people, and trying to douse the pressure on inflation, okay, by taking positive action. Yes, market But institutions, market cannot do justice if it is not superintended by an institution that is trying to be fair. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Prof. Okay, let's bring in Professor Ango, who is joining us from our Kaduna studio. Prof, I'd like you to speak on the issue of borrowing to fund the 6-point-something trillion naira deficit. Government has indicated that it will fund that both from domestic and external borrowing, and as well as from maybe PPP or so. We've been told that, yes, it's safe for us. We are still on the safe threshold. You may want to explain that for us so that we understand it better. But are there other positive ways that we can avoid external borrowing? For instance, there are many government institutions, enterprises out there that are not remitting their, tax returns. And we are also expecting, like Prof is giving us hope, huge returns from the PIA.
So you have really virtually answered the question. There are ways. Last year or so, the government-owned enterprises remitted about 400 billion or so, which they were not remitting before. If you remember, when JAM registrar returned some billions of naira at one point, JAM was not even an enterprise per se, but when they returned some money, it was news. It was a news item. That means basically there are government-owned enterprises that are sitting on a lot of money, that are spending those monies, that are not remitting those monies effectively. So if we are able to, and I believe the National Assembly said they are going to put an eye on those things, we can actually reduce that substantially by making or by looking inward. Another way, obviously, is that while it does not make much sense to increase tax rate or things like that, given the economic circumstances of the country, obviously there is need to widen the net. There are, every year, it's encouraging since this government came in, that every year you hear that customs, they are beating their previous target. The Federal Revenue Service is beating their previous target on collection and all that. But that is encouraging. That is good. But then what are we missing? What are the funds that are not being caught? What are the taxes that are not being caught in the tax net, if you look at it? So basically, like the President said, our problem sincerely is a revenue problem. We have a huge population. We have an economy that is challenged. Yes, there are policies that have been put in place that are reversing our dependence on oil, but we depend on oil now for foreign exchange. We depend on oil for a lot of 3.17 trillion is expected as from tax, from oil-related things. Now, we need to widen the net. We need to ensure that whatever is recoverable is recoverable. We also now need to ensure that those government-owned enterprises that are generating revenue are only using what is reasonable, and they are being monitored so that whatever is excess is actually returned to the central corpus of the government so that they can be utilized. We are hopeful that coming into 2022, the pressure on the Naira will reduce, because we are hoping that the private sector initiative of the refinery will come in, and that means probably reducing or probably even ultimately completely stopping importation of oil. So that will reduce that, and so we need to look inwards. Another thing that Professor Ken mentioned also was the issue of we have reservoir of a lot of funds that are in the country. I think whatever need to be borrowed locally should be borrowed locally so that there won't be pressure on the foreign exchange side. I think that is what we need to do going forward into 2022.
All right, Professor Yusha Ango, thank you very much. Still a number of issues to deal with. Of course, we'll always return to the question of the appropriation bill going forward. But I just wanted to also ride on this whole issue of borrowing. And what essentially we are getting right and what we are not getting right. It appears that in its oversight function, the legislature is more enthusiastic about, if you like, for in a manner of speaking, proper accounting for hidden revenues of government in revenue-generating agencies. Ordinarily, that also should be an executive branch responsibility. What is it that we can do more efficiently to ensure that these hidden revenues are brought to the treasury? Because part of the reason is that we keep hearing that, oh, our challenge is revenue and so on and so forth, and yet a number of agencies are generating revenue. And is it also not a challenge that it's the commissions, if you like, the returns that some of these revenue agencies get, those commissions would appear to be, in our current circumstance, extravagant, if not scandalous?
Well, it will also depend on their justification. But I think the most important thing is when collections are done and they are seen to have been done and it's diverted, it should be criminalized. And it's not just criminalized by documentation. We should see government go after agencies of government-owned agencies that are not properly accounting, for their revenue. I think more than that, there's this general belief that once you run a government-owned enterprise, it's that's your own piece of action, and that whatever comes from there, it's at your the usage is at your discretion. And I think it's wrong. To a large extent, I am seeing a reform, in that regard too, especially in the 2022 appropriation bill, as it were, with the capturing of both expenditure and, of course, income and revenue sides of the government-owned 64 government-owned enterprises. But I think there is a need to have a more activist approach, to monitoring and, of course, auditing what they are doing. Yes, I agree. It should not just be about legislative oversight alone. I want to see more clear audit reports, especially from the Auditor General's office. And it should be a direct engagement between the Auditor General's office and the Accountant General's office. Because if we are talking about revenues, organically earned revenue are better, than, of course, what we have been resorting to, of course, again, because of exigencies. Well, the only other matter is, are we likely to also earn so much to fill the gap that we need to fill at this point in time? Despite what we may earn from the enterprises, from the government-owned enterprises, are they enough? Will they be enough, to fill the gap that we need to fill? I still believe that still securing some debts would still be necessary.
Niyi, thank you. Prof. Ken, my last question to you, your closing thoughts. What, in your economic, lenses, do you see might be a barrier to implementation of the budget?
No, is the extent to which we can mobilize these revenues, which is really what you're talking about. You see, there is more activism from the Senate on revenue generation. I've been to their hearing on the revision of Fiscal Responsibility Act 2007, and you could see the venom. They are all out. In fact, there was over 200 Schedule 2 MDAs. They say everybody should go in. So you're talking about all MDAs now open to make a return. And then you've also seen in the Finance Act, the last Finance Act, where they are capping spend to revenue, 50%. So you're not allowed to spend more than 60% of your revenue. So you've got that coming. You've also got the normal requirement of the FRA 2007 is that you should pay 80% of your operating surplus to the Consolidated Revenue Fund. And many are not doing that. And they're supposed to be doing it every quarter. And then what you now see, the aggression now is, all right, if you're not doing it, we are coming straight for your money at source and take 25%. And that's happening. So there's so much going out now. They are out for, and in fact, even the most impactful is enforcement was the lacuna in the FRA 2007. They've now taken the enforcement is at the level of the officer, you're going to jail. You are going to pay either 500,000 or 1 million plus 6 months sentence or both. That is, and then it's no longer saying, oh, you hide under your ministry or your NTA to, no. It goes for you as an individual, and then it classifies certain blended. You know, if you look at the act, it says this is the condition under which you can borrow. That it has to be for capital expenditure or for human resource development. And you have to show us as a concessionary loan over a long period. And then it turns around to the financial institutions, lend, they say, if you lend beyond these terms, it is unlawful. It says it is unlawful. And then it comes and says many to officers, it's an offense. If you do that, it's an offense. And then it gives prosecutorial power to the FRC to actually prosecute, not to wait for EFCC to come in and drag it for 3 years. The whole terrain is changed. It's because of the aggression of the Senate subcommittee on finance. So we're moving into uncharted territories now, and more money are coming.
All right, Professor Ken Ife, Economic Policy Analyst, would like to appreciate you sincerely for your thoughts on this conversation. Professor Oyinola Olani, Economic Department, University of Abuja, also we do appreciate your contribution, sir. Thank you. Very much, let me also appreciate our friend and our brother, Niyi Akinshiju. He's a financial and investment analyst. We always appreciate you on our program. Professor Yushao Ango, Professor of Finance and Entrepreneurship, Dean, School of Postgraduate Studies, Kaduna State University. Thank you very much, Prof, for joining us from Kaduna.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
All right. And Nigeria Super Eagles suffered a big blow to Central African Republic in March the 3, 2022 FIFA World Cup qualifiers. And sprinter Blessing Okagbare faces 3 fresh doping charges. Let's join our sports desk for details of these and more.
The Super Eagles of Nigeria were defeated 1-0 by the Central African Republic in their third Group C game of the 2022 FIFA World Cup qualifiers at the Teslim Balogun Stadium, Lagos, on Thursday. By dropping points in Lagos, Ghana Droids men remain at the top of Group C table with 6 points after 3 games. And Nigerian sprinter Blessing Okagbare is facing 3 charges after testing positive for human growth hormone and EPO, offences that forced her to pull out of the Tokyo Olympics, the Athletics Integrity Unit said Thursday. The IAU revealed that Okagbare tested positive for blood booster EPO in Nigeria in June, in addition to another failed test of human growth hormone in Slovakia in July, which was announced during the Olympics. Meanwhile, Blessing Okagbare denies all the charges and has requested that each of them be submitted to a disciplinary hearing, the IAU said.
All right, let's take some entertainment story.
I was in the newsroom looking into the highs and lows of the Nigerian entertainment industry as Nigeria marks 61 years of independence. When this middle-aged man dressed in white and green crashed into the News 24 newsroom, he put up quite an act. Oh my! At first sight, I thought he was a traditional medicine practitioner as he advanced towards a number of my colleagues seated in the newsroom, until this exchange took place.
What's your name? I'm Joseph. Oh no, your name is not Joseph, because African person wasted the answer. You miss rodeo. You miss rodeo. One name.
Okay, at this point, my curiosity got the better of me as I proceeded to have a conversation with him. And it turned out that he loves to sing and has interesting views on Nigeria's music industry today.
We've been seeing somebody like Sonny Ade. We've been seeing somebody like Victor Olaya. We'll be seeing somebody like Victor Wifo, Fela Anukulako Kuti, and all the rest. These are the people that have been projecting the integrity of Nigerian entertainment affairs. Our young people are doing wonderfully well all over the world globally. The problem and the issue I have with them is vulgar content, which is non-African, because we are people of culture, we are people of heritage of a particular aspect of life, so we should respect that.
And while Nigeria has been celebrating the many international awards won by some of her music acts, it turns out that he does not see what we are celebrating.
Why not us come home and do our own African Music Award, where we could showcase high life, where we could showcase Akbala music, where we should showcase Bangolo music, where we should showcase a lot of aspects of African music and Nigerian music. But what they did was what we can say belittling us in terms of entertainment. What is Grammy to compare to what is? Why can't us make our own Grammy here? Just like what is happening in the big whatever Nigeria. But these are a way to waste our resources, our energy.
He also had a message for Generation Y, Z, and Alpha.
Go back to their rural areas and tap some knowledge, some wisdom about how African culture used to be. It's never too late. African culture is yet untapped. And if we tap it, let me tell you, it can even pay all the whole bills, all the whole debt we have in Africa. Because one sheep of African grass is a lot to pay African debt.
And his name is Ajimiri Oswagu Amechefu, a Pan-African musician who also claims to be multilingual. We may be hearing more from this interesting personality, as I intend to invite him over some other time. But for now, it's time to go. Kemini Williams with E-News.
All right, so that's it. And good morning, Nigeria, for today and indeed for the week. We hope you enjoy your weekend. Good morning, Nigeria is back on Monday at 7 in the morning. I'm Kingsley Osadomo.
All right, and I am Claire Chiko Dinaka Samira Dilabu Abdurazak. Don't forget to join us in the fight against rape and rapists. And from all of us here in the studio, have a great weekend.